For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNewsGlobal, and welcome to this special show on the issues following the collapse of India-China military-level talks in Trishul only late last evening. I'm Surya Gangadharan, and my guest for this evening is General Rakesh Sharma. Many of you would know of him. He was former GOC 14 Corps, Fire and Fury Corps. That corps is responsible for the defense of Ladakh, Siachen, and Kargil. General, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Surya.
Sir, not for the first time, one gets the impression that India has again been caught flat-footed, shocked, surprised by the Chinese again, I mean, the collapse of yesterday's talks, from what we hear from everyone, nobody anticipated it. Nobody, it seems, was prepared for something of the sort of thing happening. I mean, we don't seem to read the Chinese very well, do we?
Okay, thank you, Surya, for inviting me. I don't think that we would have been flat-footed. It is the level of information in the open domain. So in the open domain, which is between you and me and other media, there is a level of information available. When talks take place, an agenda is shared prior to the talks between the two parties. The agenda is approved at the highest of levels of both countries. From the Chinese side, it will come from the CMC. From our side, it will get approved in Delhi. And that agenda is supplied earlier. So I'm sure if an agenda was supplied for this talks previously, what will be the outcome of that agenda as part of the talks could have been contemplated. What would happen? My good guess is that it could have been possible to imagine as to what will be the Chinese position on this particular issue of PP-15, which has come under contention now, and whether the Chinese will accept the formula that has been going on for finding some kind of peace in the previous locations. If the same formula is applied here, say kind of creating no patrolling zones or buffer zones as many call it, whether it will be acceptable to Chinese or not acceptable to Chinese. So that that thought process would have gone into by the hierarchy, and it would have been one of the options available. The Chinese may not accept the same thing which has happened, say in Gogra, or it has happened in Galwan Valley, or it has happened in Depsang. Whether that same thing will be acceptable at PP-15 or not. Why we can debate it here. But people who matter, this thought would have gone it already in their minds.
Mm-hmm. So what happens now? The talks are deadlocked. The Chinese have said they've described our demands as unrealistic, unreasonable. So does that mean we can't revisit this at a later date?
You see, everything is revisitable. Everything can be spoken of and everything can be discussed. Except at this time, the tone and tenor of the statements given out by the official Global Times and the WTC spokesperson, the brigadier senior colonel who spoke, were kind of sanctimonious. They were condescending. They were not in good system, good decent behavior. They were fairly arrogant. It's not what Indian media talks about. Indian media, what you are talking, what I'm talking as a representative for the media, is we are private citizens. But Global Times is not a private citizen. Global Times is a government agency. So when you use sanctimonious terms, or you use condescending terms or hurtful terms, well, that's the governmental policy. That pains. So I think that is a great negative that brings in, that Global Times brings to the table. And I read a threat into what Global Times is saying. This tweet was kind of threatening. So do they think we are in 62? This is 2021. You can't threaten a nation on the threat of the India's stature in 2021. It's not done. These are not decent behavior.
So what you're telling me is that this is something which has come down from Beijing, and the local commander has followed suit. He has obeyed Beijing's command. like a good
I,
soldier.
all soldiers are same. I read into this. See, Gogra happened. Hot spring is not an issue. Hot springs have been brought about by media, and I don't talk hot springs at all. But PP15 is way out above the Changchanamo Valley. It's another nala which goes upwards, and it actually, if you go along that nala, you can actually land up in Galwan River Valley. And I would deem it that where the face-off happened in Galwan last year, between that and the Galwan post of 1959, which is other side of Karakoram range, 100 odd kilometers, Chinese have made a number of these posts and pickets. So when you climb up from the Changchanmo Valley along this nala, you can actually land up towards that Galwan post of 1959 where CRPF was ambushed, or it will go into the Galwan River behind the Chinese defenses. So PP15 is what we have been visiting earlier. It has been patrolled. Now I think Chinese have got little overtly sensitive are going to PP15. What I gather from the media, if PP15 is the issue here, which is I would put it little north of Changchanmo Valley, the valley where the river valley which joins up with Shok River. Well, they have blocked us to go in further into this area towards Depsang Plateau. Finally, it leads up to Depsang Plateau. So they are denying us any opportunity of going across towards Galwan River in the depth of the Galwan River, or towards the Karakoram Pass. So PP15, I deem it that they got a little overtly sensitive to it.
Mm-hmm. So they are basically blocking us again, isn't it? And
so
we appear to have.
I'm not very sure, Surya, that full facts are available to us. But if there is an issue of PP15, and PP15 we have been visiting sporadically earlier, and if now there's no decision arrived at PP15 and Global Time uses such nasty language, then obviously it means that there is a face-off near PP15, which is along this nala. That nala joins up with Changchanmo River, and there is a issue here where there is a block being established by the Chinese someplace, which they are not relenting. They are not wanting to create a no patrol zone or a buffer into these areas at PP15, where they do the same thing which has been done in other places. So here in PP15, they do not want to establish the same. So when we say we made a constructive suggestion, the constructive suggestion, one can deem it as okay, like we have done in Galwan River or Gogra. We say 2 kilometers, you go that side of PP15, we come this side of PP15, and we leave a little buffer zone or no patrolling zone or something. That kind of thought process as a constructive suggestion was not acceptable to Chinese. I do not know the facts on the ground, but this is what I deem could be one of these issues there.
Now, the big question here is, the million-dollar question is why? Why did they do it? Now, there are some who are drawing a link between what we had in Arunachal Pradesh, the face-off. Apparently, some Chinese troops were detained. There was another thing in Tawang. Do you think all these things are leading up to what happened yesterday?
Okay, see, finally there is one command, WTC, and the scheme of things, everything comes from the CMC, at least from the vice chairman of the CMC, which is the number 2 man in hierarchy. Decision would have been arrived at, even if they came to Barahuchi or they came to Tawang, there is a plan to it. There is a scheme to it. It is not that they have just landed up sporadically. So that's one part of the story. How Tawang was treated and how Barahuti was treated is not the same how Eastern Ladakh is being treated, because in both these areas they were blocked, and probably in deference to the previous CBMs, etc., the disengagement took place. From Barahuti, they spent 2 hours and went away, and in Tawang also they were blocked and surrounded, and they went back. But in the case of Galwan Valley, or say now in the area of this this river, the Nala, I can name it, but that's not necessary. This Nala which joins up at Changchanmo, this area also, they are not willing to withdraw or move back from what we are normally stating, PP15, which is our normally patrolling point from last 35 years. That's what I deem it, yes.
Mm-hmm. So what happens now? There's no date fixed for another round of talks. It's not even clear if another round of talks will happen. Is that the situation now?
Uh, See, the this belligerence of global times is not unprecedented. This is the way they talk.
Yeah.
Tone and tenor that they use against us now, well, I felt a little offended, and many of us would have felt offended. This is not done. This is not how mature nations tend to talk. You are government publication. You are not a private publication. So that having said, whether things are possible, well, things are always possible. There can always be talks around there. I want to read a little belligerence, all this noise that is made across by Global Times, and now we'll see something published in People's Daily, etc., etc. If that happens, well, this is trying to hone in more and more nationalism within the country. It is, I would rate it as something akin to what's happening on the Taiwan front with all those aircraft going. They are just trying to cultivate a kind of nationalism within the nation and saying that, okay, we are showing our face and muscle across to a peripheral nations. Talks can certainly take place, but I get anxious as to why do we keep talking peace and tranquility? Where is the peace and tranquility left now? This kind of tone and tenor does not lend itself to peace and tranquility. In fact, we should drop the word peace and tranquility from our statements. It's not necessary, because there is belligerence around here. We must talk. We must try and find a method into this whole thing. But that doesn't mean, because our statements must not be, our statements should not be belligerent. We are a humane nation, but we must not be, accepting ways that we understand you don't want peace and tranquility. Fine by us, but at least talk. At least say, go back to find a via media as to how to maintain it. Otherwise, in this PP-15, troops will face to face and sit there like they were sitting on Razangla or Richindla. Are we wanting to go back to the phase of Razangla and Richindla with troops facing each other? And now the troops are carrying weapons. The Dandawala, the program is finished because there are rules of engagement. We know we have to protect ourselves, so people are carrying weapons. So if people are carrying weapons, well, so be it. You have to be cautious. You can't threaten us, because in matters of warfare, in matters of high altitude warfare, I think we know our beans. We know our beans so well that Chinese should be cautious of the fact how we can handle things issue. So I would deem it, and I would say that we have to still encourage talks onto other areas. I do not know if Demchok is still a situation there, but if Demchok is still a situation, we should say, okay, we will talk PP-15. Let's open on Demchok. Well, why should we have a face-off across the Demchok Nala? One people sitting this side, one people sitting that side, all with fingers on the triggers. We need to say, okay, we walk back and we walk back. We must keep the channels of communication open through the medium which is going through. But that does not mean we are afraid and we keep saying that there is peace and tranquility and all that. That's okay. You don't want to talk peace and tranquility. We don't want to talk peace and tranquility. But we want to talk about these things happening here.
I just like to refer to some of our viewers whose comments and questions and observations are coming in. First of all, a thank you to Rajneesh. He's, I think, donated about $7 Canadian dollars to StratNewsGlobal. Rajneesh, thank you so very much. And he's also got a question. Illogical behavior in Himalayas is all part of Xi Jinping's desperate measure to steer the discontented middle-class murmurs to nationalistic jingoism. This is partly flows into what you were just telling me.
Yeah, so, in the last discussion that I had with you, if you recollect, we said the same thing. That there's an internal change happening, a dramatic internal change happening in China. They are going more and more socialist by nature, and getting into socialism, there is a desire to have equitable distribution of the pie, and therefore there is a pressure being built up against the corporation and the rich and the oligarchs and all the billionaires, so that the distribution can take place equitably within the nation. When that starts happening, there is bound to be a little shortfall, or maybe larger shortfall of the economy, and because there will be headwinds here, there will be global pressures around here. If that all is happening, Well, the best way to to bring the jingoism, the nationalistic fervor, is to keep the borders busy. You keep the borders busy, whether it is in Taiwan or in South China Sea or it is at Ladakh. It suits the government to say, okay, we are bold and forceful. These are two separate things, and their economy is their business. But the border issues are our business, and we will handle it.
Mhm. So, does the risk of conflict increase now, given the fact that we have 50,000 troops more or less face to face here, in the dark at least?
So I do not go to figures of 50,000. Yeah, very difficult to count 50,000 people into that altitude. So I do not know what figures, but I take in the statements of what was stated by the Chief Army Staff recently in the dark, and I read into the statement. I think we used to say there are two divisions, but now I read into his statement as saying that he's got larger than two divisions. Yeah. So this is what I deem it. I mean, I'm just reading into the chief statement out here.
Yeah.
And if he's got more than two divisions, initially he brought two, maybe he's got one more, one and a half more. So you have 3 to 4 divisions. There is a credible threat into the Ladakh sector. I won't say the same thing to Arunachal sector, because Arunachal Pradesh, there is a Brahmaputra river. He has to cross the Brahmaputra river before he comes towards the line of actual control on the Arunachal Pradesh, which will be visible to us. So we have not heard any information on that side. But this side and the entire sector is with Xinjiang. There's a difference between Himachal, Uttarakhand, Tibet border and Ladakh. Ladakh is looked after by Xinjiang Military Division, and that General Liu Lin, who was talking to us all this while, he's been promoted to a lieutenant general and he's taken over as the Xinjiang military commander, overall military commander. So he's been promoted there. The other side, which is Uttarakhand Tibet border and Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim borders, have been looked after by the Tibet division. So there are two different divisions. There are two different lieutenant generals looking after this. Now, I would say that in Ladakh, I'm not saying that we are on the brink of war, but he threatened us. In the Global Times tweet, he threatened us. He made, I could quote it. I took it. He says Chinese experts warned that India could trigger another conflict, and the PLA must be ready to respond. This is today's tweet. It's not in good taste. It is a kind of threat. So be it. If it is a threat, we have to be prepared for it. It is not that we are at the edge of a war, but we ought to be cautious of the fact that there is a threat which has been given out in a tweet by a government publication of China, and we prepare for it. And I'm sure we are thinking this way.
So I'm going to get back to a question that I asked you in our last encounter last week, where I mentioned that we always appear to be reactive, and giving justifications for Chinese transgressions into our territory. What prevents us from going out there and giving them the kind of message that they need to be given? I'm not talking of shooting and all that, no, but the kind of things they do on our territory. Do we do it? Do we need to do it? Must we be more proactive in those terms?
So in 2013, we did it. When Depsang happened, we did an operation, and which actually led to some kind of a withdrawal from both sides. And I would say it, and I know how armed forces function, especially in these areas. There would be other areas which we have been proactive, and we are holding on to ground which can be stated to be, even the Chinese may be deeming it is their territory. We may be holding on to such area. I'm not saying categorically I know it, but I know this is how schemes function and how plans function, and I'm sure we have been doing it. It is not necessary for us, for the armed forces, to inform the general public as to where we have gone and what we are doing. It's not essential, but absolutely. I would accept the fact that I know how they would do it. They would have taken actions across the border, and I'm not talking about Eastern Ladakh. I would say even the Himachal Tibet border or the Uttarakhand Tibet border, similarly in the northeast, we would be doing similar actions to deny it. To take a step forward in what we are saying, is this the future? Is this the future for our managing of the border?
Yes.
Well, I would say that even if it taxes the Indian Army so much for doing this, there is no option out of it. Because we know he came to Barahuti, he tried something in Tawang, and there would be many other areas he would try. We were prepared in these areas. So I'll take it this way that if we have to be cautious of along the border, even if it is not in line of control, but the domination of line of actual control in even areas which are not disputed is essential, because these can turn disputed anytime.
Sir, we are nearly at the end of our time. I have a question here from Mukesh Singh. He says, do we have a mindset to fight China at first place? Are we ready mentally? Is top leadership um, is the top leadership ready for this kind of um, are we ready for?
So, you see, nobody wants to fight a war. But to answer your question simply, yes, yes, and yes. I mean, the top leadership and also the military leadership. You know, the armed forces are well prepared to fight a territorial war. Territorial war, we are masters. And I think it must have been said 100 times earlier. In high altitude, we have learned hard way over decades altogether how to fight wars of this kind. So yeah, I'm not being bombastic about it, and not boastful about it. But then this is what we have learned, and we know it. This is 2021. We know our beings there. That's period. And yes, to say that if there is something belligerence happening across there, we'll be prepared. I'm sure these kind of eventualities and scenarios would have been pre-war gamed and pre-worked out in various locations and delegated across to commanders at various levels, maybe the corps commanders, maybe the army commanders. At places, even the lower commanders, a battalion commander may be authorized to take an action A, B, or C. So, these are schemes that are normally worked out in the army in detailed kind of measure. So, I mean, let's put this away. The armed forces don't fight war, but we are prepared for it.
On that note, General Sharma, thank you very much for that insight. Great talking to you as always. And I'm sure we'll be revisiting this subject the next weeks ahead. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Surya.
And for all of you out there who are coming forward with your questions, observations, comments, please keep them coming. Keep following us on our YouTube channel. Do subscribe. Follow us on our website and follow us on Instagram. Thank you all very much. Good night.